brief delay. What happened is, just so we memorialize this, is when the state was going to be publishing the exhibit, there was information in there that we felt was important, obviously both parties, to not be publishing to the jury because it involved sensitive nature regarding some things involving the defendant that the state doesn't have the ability to bring in with regard to him. So we wanted to make sure that we took that out so we didn't have any appellate issue later. And we showed Attorney D'Angelo, who assisted us in making sure that they also reviewed the document. So I believe the defense would stipulate that by virtue of all of our review, that everything appears to be information already going into the record, and it wouldn't be inadmissible evidence.
D'Angelo?
Yes, Your Honor, I would concur with Attorney Lemkohl's rendition of the document.
All right. And then I'd just like to address, obviously, we've moved the display board closer to the jurors for their benefit, which makes it difficult then for you and your client to see. So we are making copies so that you and your client would be able to see what's ever on the board at the time. However, if you or your client at any time say, no, Your Honor, we don't like looking at the copies, we want to see the board, I'll gladly shuffle counsel down and try to rearrange the courtroom so you can actually see what's on the board. Again, we'll have the copies, but if that causes a problem at any time, let me know, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Anything else we need to address outside the presence of the jurors?
Nope, I think we're just waiting on the copies.
All right, the copies should be here any minute. this agenda? Jurors, I apologize for the untimely delay, but we now do have the requisite copies made for the parties. You may be seated. You may continue your examination of the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just for the record, Your Honor, we have pulled up the smart board in an attempt to publish this for the jury. If at any time the jury can't see or understand some of it, we are going to be memorializing it by verbal testimony, but they can just let us know. Now, Sergeant Aronstein, you indicated that by reviewing Exhibit 89 or having a copy in front of you, that would assist you in your testimony regarding the searches that were done in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
With respect to the fact that there were these extensive searches done in this case, what was the reason it was necessary based upon the particular nature of this case?
It's very important, like I indicated earlier, that the lack of presence of something is in itself evidence. So in this particular case, it's the lack of absolutely any evidence that Victoria Prokopovitch is located or is alive is what these extensive type of searches and records indicate.
And to remind the jury, just before they had left and we had recessed, you had testified that based upon your training and experience in working all these types of cases, that in particular, if there had been a concern of suicide, that you had always located the body close, whether it's in the house or close to the residence.
That's been my experience.
Now, I'd like to, you indicated that you prepared a document, Exhibit 89. This appears to be consistent with the document that you had prepared?
Yes, it does.
Now, with respect to turning to the second page, what does this slide depict?
So it depicts the initial searches on April 26, 2013. It indicates the residence in question, 5118 Coonish Road, specifically as well as the surrounding area searches. You're able to note that the entire house, which includes basement, first floor, and second floor, are searched. And that goes to the point of what I had indicated earlier. We want to start in the immediate area where the person was last seen, and the house has to be checked very thoroughly, and that's one of the things that was done. Additionally, since this was a farmette or a farmhouse rental, I note that based on the reports that I had reviewed, that the United Police Department, K-9 conducted a search, and as indicated, that search covered areas such as all outbuildings, adjacent property, silo, wooded area, creek, and river area. Based on my training and experience, I'm aware that a lot of times the wood line that is located close to or near the residence is a lot of times a place where despondent individuals would go when...
Can I stop you there just so the jury knows? What do you mean by woodline?
Woodline is basically a place that trees begin, simplest way to put it.
Okay. So you're checking all of those areas, and that was Officer Merle Cornelius of the Oneida Police Department?
That's correct.
Besides that initial search, and the jury had heard from Officer Cornelius, is there also anything that specifically gets entered into databases to assist with getting the word out about somebody being missing?
Yeah, so as the detective, that's the part that I immediately conducted by putting an attempt to locate in this particular case, immediately to the Wisconsin East Central area, basically putting the information out that Victoria Prokopovitch is a vulnerable missing adult that we're seeking. Additionally, she was entered into the National Crime Information Center as a missing vulnerable person. This is basically a law enforcement computer program that can be accessed by any law enforcement agency in the country.
Now, with respect to the attempt to locate, that's also known by the acronym ATL.
Yes, ma'am.
And jurors may be familiar with that from different type of crime shows or television. With respect to an ATL, is that typically what law enforcement gets out anytime there's some type of instance of conduct, could be a crime, but some type of instance that they're looking for somebody?
Yes, and in cases like this, we want to get this information out to the public, the news media, anything that we can do to alert as many eyes and ears as we possibly can, so everybody's on the same page that Victoria Prokopovitch is missing and that we need to find her.
Now, as you turn to the next page, and the top of that page, is this all still a continuation of that same Friday, April 26, 2013?
That's correct, it is.
And what happens as far as additional search efforts?
We're looking for any and all possible reasonable places that we can identify where a missing person may be. So we are going down the list and we're making those checks. In this particular area, you have any medical, mental health, correctional facilities, they're all checked. In this particular case, they're outlined here. You have the Brown County Community Treatment Center, the Bellin Psychiatric Center, Bellin Hospital, Aurora Medical Center, St. Vincent's Hospital, St. Mary's Hospital, the Brown County Jail.
With respect to checking those hospitals, the jury did hear from Sergeant Tim Thomas. Was he an individual in your agency that you had tasked to check into that for you?
I did.
Okay. And with regard to all of those checks on that date, did you have negative results?
We did.
And what does that mean?
That means Victoria Prokopovitch was not located.
And now we'll proceed to the next slide. What date does this reflect, and what were the search efforts?
This would be April 27th of 2013. This would be the Saturday, and it reflects law enforcement response, specifically canine law enforcement response. In this case, 3 canines, Deputy Newtall, Deputy Rausch, and once again Officer Cornelius, who was present the day before, conducting area searches for Victoria Prokopovitch.
And when you're, I'm sorry, when you're indicating those 3 officers, those canine officers all testified, and the jury heard them as well then?
They all did testify, and the jury did hear from them, yes.
Now, as we proceed to the next slide, what date does this reflect, and what were the search efforts?
So this would be the April 28th date, which would be a Sunday, following the report of Victoria Prokopovitch being discovered missing. From the Friday up until this period of time, I had been working with the family and different search groups in order to be able to organize, supervise, and deploy an extensive search effort at the property. That was what this depicts. So once again, the main focus is to put as many resources, search resources as we possibly can at the property, at or around the property.
Now, at that time then, do you have various agencies and volunteer groups assisting law enforcement in these searches?
We do.
With respect to the searches that were conducted on this date, does that include local businesses and other places off of the grounds?
Yes, we generate information, flyers, and we start sending people out to get the word out. Or start looking at any potential surveillance video that can possibly be collected, and we're trying to show as many individuals an image of Victoria as possible to try to generate any leads or any potential sightings.
And as we proceed to the next page, what is the date of these search efforts?
So this one is April 30, 2013.
And what was done?
Once again, we're looking for any possible reasonable explanation of how an adult could possibly leave a location. So in this case, we had contacted area cab or shuttle service companies. We looked at a Green Bay as well as Shawano, which are cities located to the east and west of this particular rural area. So we checked Peckerland Taxi, Yellow Cab, Checker Cab, Astro Shuttle, Royal Taxi, Tundra Taxi, Everett of Limo Shuttle and Taxi, Cap Taxi, Shawano City Taxi, and all resulted with information that none of them had been dispatched to that area.
Now, with respect to the first few slides, you indicated and testified that those are focusing on this Coonish area, residents and the surrounding area. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, with respect to this slide, and you looking at these different types of transportation services, what's the significance of why you're looking at that?
So now April 30th, we're a number of days out from the initial report date of April 26th. We had not located Victoria Prokopovitch at the residence or in the immediate residence. We're now looking at any and all possible options of what could reasonably explain her disappearance. So we're keeping an open mind and making those checks.
Now, we're proceeding to the next slide, which is dated May 2nd of 2013. What were the search efforts on this date?
That's a date that I returned back to the Coonish Road residence. Sergeant Thomas had accompanied me. At that time, we had conducted a residence search and a vehicle search. We also looked around the surrounding properties again. And at that point in time, I had met with Mr. James Pro-Koe-Povitch and requested access to his cellular telephone. Wesley Edges was also present at that time and was documented.
Now, in the course of this investigation, who were the parties documented as last seeing Ms. Prokopovitch on the last evening she was home initially?
So the two adults that resided in the same residence with Victoria Prokopovitch and were at that residence on the 25th of April 2013 were her husband, James Prokopovitch, known as Curly, and Victoria Prokopovitch's son, Wesley Edges.
Okay. And proceeding to the next slide, on May 3rd of 2013, what does this slide reflect?
Continued and follow-up searches. Now we're looking at May 3rd, 2013. There's information that Victoria's former residence was at 320 West Pulaski Street in the village of Pulaski. We sent law enforcement resources to that location. There's information that there's a gentleman by the name of Timothy Porter was a known associate of, a known friend of Victoria Prokopovitch. It was determined to be many years prior, but he was identified to be a resident in Appleton, and law enforcement resources were sent there.
And as a result, were all of the individuals on this page spoken to and ruled out as far as having seen Victoria?
That is correct.
Okay. But it is important for you, anytime you're receiving information about possible people that could have seen her or talked to her, that you reach out to them?
Yes, and may I note that as the time goes on, the search efforts continue to expand, and they get larger and larger, and they start, as I had noted, at the initial residence with the immediate family, and they continue to expand to friends, family, and extended individuals around that person. Also, I think of importance to note is that a lot of these search efforts are overlapped in nature, therefore, so as not to miss anything and to be redundant in nature in order to verify and check everything.
And now proceeding to the next slide, May 4th of 2013, what were the search efforts?
So law enforcement efforts, in this case, a sheriff's office, were sent out to do a door-to-door canvass in the area of 5118. Coonish Road, and this documents the residences that the officers either made contact at or left flyers at.
Now, with respect to that, why is that important?
In the event that it may generate leads to a possible witness that may have witnessed something that would be pertinent to this investigation, in case Victoria Prokopovitch went over to a neighbor's house and either sought help or used the telephone or got a ride or anything to that matter, we're looking to be able to identify any and all reasonable information to explain her disappearance.
As a result of these canvasses, did you learn anything pertinent to your investigation about the whereabouts of Miss Prokopovitz?
I did not.
Now, proceeding to the next slide. And for the record, this is May 5th, 2013. What occurred with respect to investigative efforts on this date?
So this would be investigative efforts and resources that were focused at the quarry that we spoke about. This is the closed quarry that's filled with water. It's located approximately 3.2, 3.4 miles, something like that, to the west of the residence. It's known to be associated with the McKeefreys, so investigative efforts were sent to that location to conduct searches.
Now, at the time that you are conducting the investigative efforts in this case, do you become aware of some of the physical limitations that Victoria Prokopovitz had at the time she went missing?
I did.
At times in your investigation, even if you receive information that something may be plausible but not likely, do you still have a duty to investigate all of those avenues?
I do, and that goes to my point when I say that these efforts are overlapping in nature, and we don't stop basically at the, as a reference, at the edge of the yard. We continue on as far as we can possibly continue and search conduct every possible reasonable effort to locate the missing person.
And based upon your training and experience, when you're doing these investigations, a situation that could be a missing person could turn into something that could be a homicide. Would you agree?
It could.
And based upon that, do you have to look at all avenues where somebody could be located?
Correct. I guess the easiest way to explain it is any missing person investigation should be handled as a death investigation. Now, and therefore you do that because therefore you're going to be the most thorough if you handle it that way. A lot of times, if you are not able to gather certain information immediately, it may not be available at a later point. So you try to be as thorough as possible to do so on the front end.
So on this May 5th date, what were the search efforts that occurred?
So there were some canine teams with an organization called People in Paws Search and Rescue, and cadaver dog canine handler, as well as the Schwabenam Public Safety Department of Natural Resources was tasked as well to assist. They had specialized equipment that was utilized in that body of water, specifically watercraft equipped with side scan sonar, underwater robot equipped with video capabilities. At that particular time, I was also a member of the Brown County dive unit with specific training, not only in diving, but underwater crime scene investigation, and I participated in some of these searches.
Based upon the dive team searches, however, the sonar capability and the technology that's offered with this underwater robot, is this something that allows a more thorough search?
Yes, it does.
And then moving to the next slide, May 6th of 2013, what occurred on this date?
Based on some of the reports that we were receiving, we wanted to continue to conduct additional search efforts at that specific location. And as you could see, additional resources were brought in to make sure that we're as thorough as possible. On this particular date, Department of Natural Resources, the Brown County Dive Unit, the Brown County Marine Unit, the Door County Dive Unit, the Sturgeon Bay Fire Department, and Police Department, as well as the public, Schwabenam Public Safety, were amongst the entities that assisted us with the search efforts at that location.
So besides just Brown County being our county, there's now assistance from outside counties such as Door, Sturgeon Bay, and various other agencies in the search for Victoria.
That's correct.
Is it common, I guess I asked questions about how investigators in your unit assist each other. Is it also common that the various law enforcement agencies throughout the state and even the country assist each other in various investigations?
That's correct. We all possess whether a different type of resources, skills, training, and experience, and we try to draw upon each other to be able to provide the most complete effort when it comes to these things.
Now proceeding to the next page. And it says May 7th of 2013. What was done on this date?
The Department of Justice, Wisconsin Clearinghouse for Missing and Exploited Children and Adults was notified. We start working with the state, with the Department of Justice in order to compile missing persons posters and start disseminating it statewide. We're trying to get the widest footprint as we possibly can. We're trying to identify and notify as many people as we possibly can in the state and really the nation as to the disappearance of Victoria Prokopovitch to try to generate any information or leads possible to her whereabouts.
So when we've referred to Special Agent Jurgis next to me and him working with DCI, DCI is the Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigations, is that right?
That is correct.
So that's part overall Department of Justice, which Jay is a part of as well.
That is correct.
And again, the resources now, besides the hand-to-hand boots on the ground, specifically researching these properties, you're still trying to get things out nationwide in case there's any sighting of Victoria.
Absolutely.
You're not limiting your search myopically to one conclusion. It's an open investigation.
It's an open investigation. I'm trying to reach as many eyes and ears as I possibly can.
And now the next slide says May 12th of 2013. What is that?
It's another organized search that was conducted, once again focusing on the immediate area of 5118 Kunish Road. In this particular search, there were numerous members that volunteered their time. I note that there's 43 personnel and that were on scene for in excess of 8 hours, totaling over 365 man-hours worth of search efforts. There were a total of 5 rescue teams that conducted 9 search missions. These search missions included canine team, ground search missions, as well as horse and mountain search efforts.
I don't know what ground search missions is. Is that like boots on the ground, people walking on the ground?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then the next slide says May 14th, 2013. What does this slide reflect?
It reflects additional search efforts and resources that were focused at the quarry located at 6260 Quarry Drive. On this particular day, which is May 14, 2013, the Green Bay Police Department dive unit was out there, as well as the Brown County Sheriff's Office dive unit. Volunteer group People in Paws Search and Rescue that had a cadaver dog also assisted on that day at that location.
Now, we've heard and the jury's heard about various agencies, People and Paws. Is that one of those volunteer agencies?
Yes, it is.
So besides the law enforcement resources that you're expending in this investigation, you're also utilizing any and all assistance from volunteer organizations and people within the community?
That's correct.
Have those included private citizens that came forward to volunteer?
A lot of them, yes.
And were there even complete strangers coming forward from the Pulaski area and other areas to assist?
Yes.
With regard to that and the searches that were occurring, again, you're in touch with the family and you're listening, getting information about any and all possible avenues?
Yes.
Now, as proceeding to the next slide, which is dated May 21st, 2013, what does this slide reflect in your investigative efforts?
We're continuing to reach out to the community, and in this particular slide, it documents efforts conducted on May 21st, 2013, where we're reaching out to the community shelters and the Golden House locations where women seek women and men seek services when related to domestic violence and may go for safety and security. We're looking at every location we could possibly think of.
And those are agencies within the Brown County area?
They are.
Looking at the next slide, June 1st of 2013, what does this slide reflect?
Additional search efforts, this date covered both 5118 Coonish Road as well as 6260 Quarry Drive and the new zoo location. Like I indicated earlier, anytime we received any potential information where somebody may have at one point in time in their life visited, we try to put some resources to that location for search efforts. This particular date documented in excess of 417 man-hours worth of searching involving 43 personnel. It totaled 4 teams. Task Force 1 team included Rapid Search and Rescue, a volunteer group, Valley Mounted Volunteers out of Appleton, Rapid Search and Rescues out of Wisconsin Rapids, Headwater Search and K-9 Team Nina, and Kurt K-9, which is out of this Menasha, Wisconsin. There were 19 completed missions that were documented on that date. That included 9 K-9 teams, 4 horse-mounted teams, 5 boots-on-the-ground teams, and a 1 boat sonar / K-9 and GPS track team that assisted on that day.
So the jury heard from Sherry Jo Lucas, who is heading the Rapid Search and Rescue. Is that a volunteer organization?
It is, and based on this investigation, I learned that they frequently utilize each other's resources and work jointly with one another.
Because a lot of these various agencies regularly are assisting in searches for missing people or other investigative tasks?
Yes,
Now, you just outlined, okay, so Rapid Search was the boots on the ground or those volunteers. There are K-9 teams out here on this date,
there are K-9 teams.
as well as horseback mounted teams?
There are,
And there is a boat with sonar?
yes.
Now, proceeding to the next slide, which is dated June 6th of 2013, what type of investigation is done on that date?
Additional search efforts are being conducted at the quarry at 6260 Quarry Drive. There are boat operations, sonar, GPS track, underwater camera, and human remain detection K-9, as well as certified water recovery K-9 was utilized on that day.
With regard to the information that you are searching this quarry, is this the same quarry that you have already outlined you searched on 2 previous dates?
It is.
Based upon the information, at some point were there some alerts that were coming from canines in reference to human remains at the quarry?
There was some conflicting information as far as, some interest that some of the canines were having, and we wanted to make sure that we had done completely everything possible to be able to either include or exclude that area as a place of interest.
Based upon your role on the dive team, are you familiar with respect to if a body of an individual would be submerged, whether or not that is something that would float to the top?
Yeah, it has a number of variables, but generally a body would rise to the top unless it is packaged in something or weighted down.
And that's what I was going to ask you. So we're not talking about the variables, it would be something that would rise to the top.
That is correct.
You'd be able to visually see it unless, based on your training and experience, it was weighted down.
Correct.
With respect to the fact that you did have some of these suspicious alerts or things in this area, were you able to conclude at that time that you were not able to locate Victoria Prokopovitz as being anything related to that?
Yes.
Okay. I proceed to the next slide, June 11th of 2013. What does this date reflect?
There's a pit or piece of property located in Sobieski, Wisconsin that's associated with the McKeefrey business, something that We received some information that was related to the business and was familiar to Mr. James Prokopovitch. We sent some investigatory resources up there to conduct a search. Conservation warden and a wildlife supervisor and wildlife biologist assisted the sheriff's office on that particular day.
With respect to the search at this Chase pit, what did you say that the pit was related to?
The McKeefrey business.
Okay. And do you know approximately how far this pit was from the residence?
I would estimate over 10 miles.
Okay. But it's something you're still searching?
I'm searching anything that I get information on that I should reasonably look into.
What's the significance of any of the individuals in this investigation and the McKeefrey trucking business?
So the Victoria Prokopovich's husband had been employed for a significant period of time and was employed at the time of her disappearance with the McKeefrey trucking business.
As a result of the search of the pit on this date, did you recover anything of evidentiary value as far as the location of Victoria Prokopovitz?
I did not.
And we proceed to the next slide. June 22nd of 2013. What investigative evidence occurred on this date?
Additional investigatory resources or search efforts were sent to that same pit located in Sobieski, Wisconsin. This time, rapid search and rescue, 2 canine teams were utilized, human remains detection dogs, as well as a wildlife supervisor and wildlife biologist. Additionally, search resources were sent to an additional quarry that is also known to be associated with the McKeefrey Trucking Company located in W729 State Highway 29, Pulaski, Wisconsin. I began to learn that the McKeefrey's trucking business has a large number of properties that are located in various areas located in northeast Wisconsin, and so we were trying to identify as many of them as we possibly could.
Now, when you're going out there on June 22nd to the, now this is in reference to the Chase pit, you just testified you had been out there 11 days earlier on June 11th of 2013. Is it important for you to be repeating your search efforts at some of these same locations?
It is.
Why is that?
Like I indicated earlier, we want to try to overlap anything that may be missed. We're also responding to any potential information that we're receiving that leads us to suggest that additional search efforts need to be conducted.
The search at the quarry on June 22nd, 2013, now I'm noting the address. That's a different quarry than the one that you've already previously searched 3 times?
It is.
Okay. And with respect to the efforts and the search efforts of that Chase pit and this quarry on Highway 29 on this date, did they yield negative results?
They did.
And can you just explain to the jury negative results would be that you did not locate Victoria?
That's correct. We did not.
Now, the following slide states November 6, 2013. And what does this slide reflect?
So on November 6th, we're starting to enter Victoria Prokopovitch into additional online databases. This one is a very well-known national database, National Missing Persons Data System with an acronym of NAMUS. This is a database that's utilized not only by law enforcement, but also by civilians. And there are certain identifiable factors that can be entered into the system. For example, DNA, which means that if there's a body that's located anywhere in the country and this body is unidentified, law enforcement will conduct searches, and this is one of the places that they will conduct a search. And if that is done, I will be immediately notified. I am listed as a point of contact, and this case is identified within that system. And when I indicate that it's also available to the public and civilians, anybody can go online and conduct missing person searches or searches for any decedents, and if they feel like I need to be contacted, and in this particular case I had been contacted several times to follow up on decedents that were located around the country. And because we were able to identify things such as DNA and identifiable characteristics about Victoria Prokopovitch, we were able to exclude every single one of them as being Victoria Prokopovitch.
Well, when you're talking about DNA, then that gets us to our next slide. What do you mean then about the DNA profiles?
So we collect DNA that's done in a number of different ways, whether it's collecting personal items such as a toothbrush that belongs to Victoria Prokopovitch, or obtaining DNA samples from her family, such as her daughters. And we're able to generate a DNA profile for Victoria Prokopovitch, which is then entered into CODIS, which stands for Combined DNA Index System. Once again, it's a searchable database available to law enforcement. The Texas Department of Public Safety DNA Index, I believe that they're the coordinators of some of these programs. And this database is checked periodically for any potential hits, and if they are, then investigators would be notified. In this particular case, in the last approximately 8 years, I had not been notified of any hits.
So, well, let's back you up. So you indicated that you develop a DNA profile. You made a reference you could use like a toothbrush. What did you use of Victoria to develop a DNA profile in this case?
So in this particular case, I believe I tasked Sergeant Yankee to be able to conduct that particular aspect of the investigation, and I was notified that a DNA profile had indeed been developed and entered into the system. That was the information I needed as the lead detective.
Now, with respect to these hits that you've also referred to, you indicated that there had been some that through the years you had received with respect to people attempting to exclude Victoria as being the person that was located. In each of those instances, is it your testimony that you were able to determine she was not the individual?
That is correct.
And how did that occur? Were there places like in the country or the state where a deceased individual was located, maybe her sex or age? How did that occur?
I would get calls. Sometimes I would get calls from the family that would receive information that a female had been located, whether it's somewhere in Wisconsin or somewhere in the area, and I would make sure that I would contact the appropriate law enforcement agencies to start conducting a follow-up immediately. There would be other times that I would be notified of a decedent that was located in a different state through one of these different databases where I had made an entry that Victoria Prokopovitch is missing, and if any law enforcement agency or medical examiner's office or anybody that felt that there was some characteristics that needed follow-up, they would know to immediately contact me, and then we would start looking at variables to be able to either include or exclude as the individual, and each and every single time Victoria Prokopovitch was not the individual.
Now, proceeding to the next page, what does this page note with respect to investigative efforts?
Sure. So in today's day and age, social media is a big thing that reaches a lot of different individuals, and based on my training and experience, I know that maintaining a close relationship with the family, not only for the purposes of exchanging information, is very important, but also if there's any kind of updates or change in status, that there's an open line of communication and that we're updated. I learned that there had been some social media accounts in this particular case. I helped find Vicky Prokopovitch Facebook page that had been created by the family and had been distributed.
No, the jury heard some information from Jennifer Friday about looking at social media and Facebook about this page. Is this page then, this is like a public page that anyone who has Facebook could access?
It is, yes.
Okay. And at some point, did you have cause to meet with Jennifer with respect to this investigation?
I don't know if it was one of my colleagues that met and spoke with her, but she was interviewed by law enforcement a number of times. That's correct.
In reference to this investigation?
In reference to this, and really, she had a place to be able to do her own research per se, or have a place to turn to in order to be able to gain some information. And this really just speaks to the ability to reach the quantity of people.
And is there an individual in the Prokopovitz family that has kept up with respect to updating this page?
Yes, there is.
Who's that?
Marshall Loritz, Victoria Prokopovich's daughter.
Okay. And now as we proceed to the next slide, it says 2013. What were some of the searches that were done with respect to this?
There was a couple of areas of interest that were identified. Once again, a child home for Victoria Prokopovitch in the city of Green Bay was checked. There was a cemetery that was known to be associated with her, and some flyers were distributed at that location.
When we're talking about the cemetery, as part of this investigation, did you learn that Victoria had had a stillborn baby?
I did.
Through that and conversations with the family, was it believed that a cemetery could be a place she would visit?
Yes, in years prior to her disappearance.
So with respect to what you're outlining here, you're still in touch, learning information about the habits of and the life of Victoria in order to attempt to locate her?
I am.
And moving to the next page, the Help Find Vicky Twitter page, what is that?
It's just another social media account to try to reach a
Okay.
bigger population.
A different form of social media?
Yes.
And proceeding to the next page, it's dated October 6, 2013. What is that?
There's a church that's located on County Trunk Highway C in the western portion of Brown County. Just additional search efforts were conducted in that area.
And the next page, October 16, 2013. What is that?
Additional search efforts were conducted in that particular area, utilizing K-9 teams.
And with respect to each of those searches now, did they yield negative results?
They did.
Again, meaning that Victoria was not located?
That's correct.
And proceeding to the next slide, December 7, 2013, what does this reflect?
It reflects the rapid search and rescue, documenting numerous search efforts relating to their agency that culminated with the search. So what this is meant to represent is that they've been involved in numerous search efforts up until this particular date.
And with respect to this year now of 2013, you've outlined searches that occurred in May, throughout June, and into the fall and November, October, and now December. Is that right?
That's correct.
And if we move to the next slide. Now this is March 19th of 2014. This is the following year. What does this note?
Additional search efforts at the quarry that we had earlier discussed. This is a pictorial representation of that quarry.
With respect to searching different entities or bodies of water, is it important to just keep checking in case anything shifted or changed at all?
Yes, and also different seasons and times of the year. We have the capability of diving under ice. We also have the capability of diving in the summer, obviously, and we want to continue to check the area. I was notified that there was some interest that were shown by some canines. The particular quarry has a significant depth in certain areas of 60 feet, and we just wanted to be able to search that particular area as best as possible.
Now, I'm noting the last slide was December of 2013. Now we've moved ahead 3 months. During this entire time frame, from when she has gone missing April 26, 2013, proceeding to where we are now, has law enforcement continued to follow up with private individuals, taking statements and gaining any information about Victoria?
Absolutely. It's a dual investigation in a sense. One part is really continued search and ever expanding search efforts. And the second part is the intelligence portion of it. It's the speaking with folks, sometimes more than once, in order to be able to gather as much information as possible. As that information comes in, we're looking at every possible detail that we can to be able to identify if there's anything else that could be followed up on. When those things are done, we follow up on those things. And really, when that's all said and done, and you think you've talked to everyone and you've looked everywhere else, you regroup as a investigative team, and then you do it all over again.
So we've had some questions throughout the trial, things being asked of witnesses. Well, but did you locate anything of evidentiary value? Do you also find something of evidentiary value when you don't locate something?
Yeah, the absence of evidence is at times evidence of itself.
And would you agree with that in this case?
Yes, I would.
Now, the next slide, dated March 20th, 2014. What does this reflect?
Additional search efforts at that particular quarry.
And again, is this still one of those quarries then that you had initially searched?
Numerous times.
Okay. And now the following slide says May 14th, 2014. What is that?
Additional search efforts as time goes on, whether it's through searching. So in this particular case, we identified a new piece of equipment that may assist us to further examine a particular area. So in this particular area, this 3900 towfish sonar system was deployed in that quarry to document the bottom of the quarry digitally. There was also a remotely operated, it's a remotely operated vehicle that was utilized. Anytime there's an area of interest that's identified, we're able to then isolate that area and actually put either a camera or a diver or both to be able to examine that particular area.
Now, with respect to the last slide then, that quarry search was the Green Bay Dive Unit. This one was the sonar system you're addressing?
Yes.
So there are two different ways that you could search this quarry?
There are more than two ways. There are numerous different ways that you can utilize technology, and like I indicated earlier, it's basically overlapping efforts that you're doing. If you're putting, I guess the equivalent of searching on the ground is putting divers in the water, that's boots on the ground, you know. Otherwise, in this particular case, you're utilizing technology in order to enhance the diver's ability in order to search a particular area. And
the next slide, September of 2014. What is that?
By this point in time, it was learned that James Prokopovitch had retired from his place of employment and had turned his vehicle back into his employer. The truck was identified as a 2005 GMC Sierra. It was documented, and it was sent off to the crime lab for forensic processing.
Now, this truck that was identified as belonging to the defendant, Jim Prokopovitz, I'm showing you exhibit number 33. What is that?
That is Mr. Prokopovich's work vehicle.
Okay. That's consistent with the truck that you searched on that date?
Yes.
What's the date of that photo?
This particular photo is 5/2/2013. I believe I would have used the same photo for this particular exhibit.
And with respect to that, though, that's a week after Victoria would have gone missing?
Yes.
I'm showing you exhibit 34. Do you recognize that?
Yes, it appears to be the same vehicle.
A photograph of the same vehicle?
Yes, it does.
And with respect to the condition of that vehicle, does it appear to be clean or dirty?
No, it appears to be dirty with some damage on the passenger side of it.
Now, you indicated that there was a search now a year and a half later of that vehicle, and that had negative results. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And the following slide, October 21st of 2014, what search efforts does this slide reflect?
It just represents additional social media footprint documenting the disappearance of Victoria Prokopovitch in a place where additional leads could be gleaned.
So this tour, what does that mean?
So I received this information from the family of Victoria Prokopovitch. They've indicated that Victoria Prokopovitch was featured on the Squeaky Wheel tour through GINA for Missing Persons Foundation. The date of that was October 21st, 2014, which was held in Mason City, Iowa. There's a link that's located. Victoria Prokopovitch was also featured in a concert on October 21st, 2014. And there was press release and posters that were distributed. Once again, we're just trying to get the information out as much as we possibly can.
Now, when you're saying information from the family, which particular individual are you getting this information from?
My point of contact was Marcia Lords.
Are you receiving any information from Jim Prokopovitz regarding these types of benefits?
I'm not, no.
Now, the next page, letters to our missing, what is that?
So Marcia Prokopovitch published a book. There were 2 editions of that book called Letters to Our Missing. There was basically a section within that book that documented Victoria Prokopovitch, and it actually contained my professional information on there, my contact information, should anybody have any information as to Victoria Prokopovitch.
With respect to the efforts that Marcia had made, were you also aware that Marcia had petitioned the governor of Wisconsin in regards to making a missing persons day?
I was.
So the efforts that Marcia was doing with respect to her mother, she was extending that to also assist other families of missing people?
She was, and that's represented in this book. This book documents numerous other families of the missing.
And now the next page. What does this slide reflect?
It just reflects additional community outreach that was conducted by the family to bring awareness to Victoria's disappearance.
Now, not only outreach by the family, are these organizations or businesses that were assisting with respect to getting the word out about Victoria?
They're donating their time and resources. And what I would point out as significant here is that these are local, Super Ron's that's on the list. That's something that Victoria was known to have been employed at previously. And when it comes to the pizza companies and other restaurants, those are businesses within our community that serve our community and would be another pipeline of being able to distribute information.
That included Los Bonitos?
It does.
And The Right Place?
It does.
And the Green Bay Pizza Company?
It does.
Besides the Super Rons?
Correct.
Now, proceeding to the next slide, April 29th, 2015. What does that slide reflect?
So as I indicated earlier, that the search efforts continue and they continue to expand, and you continue to look for additional resources and you continue to draw additional resources to be able to do a search. So now, even though numerous searches at the residence and surrounding area had been conducted at 5118 Coonish Road, this particular date, the Wisconsin Crime Lab was brought in to conduct even more searches at that particular residence.
So back in April of 2013, when Victoria goes missing, there isn't any kind of search warrant on that date, right?
There's not a search warrant, no.
And what, at this point, now in April of 2015, why are you doing one now?
Well, like I indicated before, searches had been done previously, but now we're bringing in an entire crime lab that has to travel a significant geographical distance to get there. We're anticipating doing a search at this residence for the majority of the day. Now, the only way we can do a search of a private residence is through somebody's consent that has standing, meaning that they can legally provide consent for a certain area, or to be able to obtain a court order. Now, somebody has an absolute right to change their mind at any time they want. And
But on this date, you were able to do a search of the residence?
I was.
Okay. Now, with respect to that, at the time that you're doing and conducting this search, based on your investigation, since 2013, you're there 2 years later, was it reasonably believed you would have located Victoria Prokopovitz at that time?
No, we're looking for any evidence or information that would lead us to her location.
Okay. But you have questioned now that you haven't located her?
That's correct.
Okay. And so on that date, as part of that, there is Wisconsin State Crime Lab and resources brought in to investigate?
That's correct.
And with regard to that investigation, you do scaled drawings with respect to the residence?
The Brown County Sheriff's Office Reconstruction Unit conducts scale drawings of the location and surrounding area.
And the jury's heard from Nikki Yankee with respect to that, but overall, there's nothing located with respect to the presence of Victoria Prokopovitz.
That's correct.
And proceeding to the next slide, September 17th of 2015, what does that reflect?
Additional ongoing community outreach efforts in this particular case by the family of Victoria Prokopovitch.
And who organized that function?
This is the information that was provided to me by Marsha Loritz. She appears to be a keynote speaker here at a Crime Stoppers event, speaking about her mother.
And the following slide, September 17th, 2015, what does that reflect?
Additional community outreach that's being conducted at the Polka Days, which is a popular event in Pulaski, a small town located a number of miles away from the Kunish Road address.
As part of your investigation, did you have the opportunity to get to know the location of Pulaski as well as the vibe of it as a community?
I did.
Did this appear to be a pretty tight-knit community?
It's a very small, tight-knit community, yes.
And the individuals that law enforcement encountered within this community, many of them came forward and attempted to assist in locating Victoria?
They did.
And used their resources?
They did.
When you're talking about Pulaski Polka Days being a popular event, isn't it true that for Pulaski in particular, it's very much a highly attended event?
It is.
So it would be an opportunity to get a lot of information out to everybody living in that community?
Yes.
When we're talking about the type of community that Pulaski is this somewhat of a rural community?
It is.
Is there a lot of open space and fields?
There are.
Are there also a lot of farmhouses?
There are.
Based upon your familiarity with this Kunish Road address, was this also an area that was somewhat remote and rural?
It was.
Now, when you're talking about there were individuals that agreed to allow the family to put up missing persons banners in their front yard. So these were people that were allowing this investigation and the family to use their residences to get the word out about Victoria, is that right?
Yes, they were in support of the search efforts.
And now the following slide, it's entitled November 7th, 2015. What does that note?
There had been a tip that was received that we should potentially look at an area, a wooded area, located in Oconto County. It's a county located to the north of the residence. There was no specificity really providing us much direction of what we should be looking for, but we went to that location and looked anyway and utilized canine resources as well as the sheriff's office from both counties and the Wisconsin Division of Criminal Investigation.
So when you're talking about a tip, based upon that coming forward in this investigation, are you following up and checking on each and every tip that you're getting in this investigation regarding the potential whereabouts of Victoria?
We're trying to overturn every single stone we possibly can.
And with respect to this tip, there was searches done by various agencies,
There were.
and that would include DCI,
It did.
as well as the Oconto County Sheriff's Department
It did.
and Brown County.
It did.
And there were canine searches done?
There were.
Besides the canine searches, and the jury's heard from some of the canines and their handlers, when there are canine searches, there's physically people walking alongside these canines.
They are.
So we have the benefit of the visual observations of individuals as well as the canines.
Yes.
With respect to the search then on November 7th of 2015, did this yield any results as far as locating Victoria Prokopovitz?
It did not.
Now, the following slide, entitled 2015, what does this note? So 2015, this slide, what does this note?
It just looks at having conducted additional records checks. So in particular, the Wisconsin Statewide Information Center was checked.
Well, I'm sorry, I'll interrupt you right there. Was this actually, this slide, did this entail the efforts of DCI and Special Agent Jurgis?
It did. I would have reached out to, like I said, different entities to be able to help me assist in certain things. So this is my documentation of what was reported to me by Special Agent Jurgis.
Okay, and what did this entail?
So it entailed searches of the databases, specifically the Statewide Information Center, the United States Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, International Criminal Police Organizations, Interpol.
So when you're looking at these different organizations and you're entering Victoria's identity into these, what is this that you're checking for?
We're looking for any signs of life.
Are you looking for movement?
We are.
And so with respect to this slide, does it indicate whether or not Victoria had ever legally crossed the border outside of the United States?
It does not.
Does it indicate whether or not she has traveled outside of the United States at all?
She had not.
And does it indicate whether or not she had obtained or had a valid United States passport?
She did not.
Okay. So all of these things, again, are efforts to determine also a travel route, if she possibly could have been alive.
That's correct.
Based on your overall investigation and in speaking with her family members, in fact, isn't it true that she didn't even own a passport?
That's correct.
But you're still double checking all of the information you've received from the various resources?
I have, as a matter of fact, it was reported that she had only left a state, and that's to go to a neighboring state of Minnesota only once, and that was many, many years prior to her disappearance. Otherwise, it appears that she had remained in the northeast Wisconsin area her entire life.
And besides that, with respect to her contact with others, was it reported that she wasn't really having contact with anybody out of the state either?
That's correct.
Now, the next slide says November 2nd, 2016. What does this reflect?
It reflects checks with pharmacies and pharmacy records. So in this particular check, it was identified that Victoria Prokopovitch was in need of prescription medication, and that's something that's been an ongoing thing in her life, and there's something that she would need to have access to. So through interviews, it was determined that her husband, James Prokopovitch, was the one that was responsible in obtaining those prescription medications for her. He identified 2 different pharmacies that he utilized. Sometimes he indicated he utilized the Pulaski Pharmacy, but more frequently he utilized a different pharmacy located in the city of Green Bay. So this is a depiction of the pharmacy checks that were done. It was noted that there were 3 filled prescriptions for Victoria Prokopovitch back in 2012 with no further activity noted after July of 2012 at that particular pharmacy.
Now, with respect to that information, on the date that Victoria had gone missing, and in the interviews that the defendant gave with you regarding the possession of those prescriptions, did he indicate that the majority of those were due to be filled?
He did.
And did he indicate whether or not he filled them on that date?
He did not. He indicated that he had the intention of having them filled in the next day or so following her disappearance. So I would have expected to see a refill within the following days after April 25th, 26th of 2013.
If you'd think somebody was alive?
If I thought that he would have, if I thought that the prescription would have been filled.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't filled?
It was not.
Okay. Now, with respect to that, did you follow up and get some records regarding who was actually signing for these prescriptions when they were picked up?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the next slide for the CVS pharmacy where I was able to obtain those records.
Okay. And the next slide does say November 4th, 2016. So what is that?
So this would be my documentation of having conducted records checks at the CVS pharmacy where James Prokopovitch indicated that he frequently picked up prescription medication for his wife. These records were provided, and my analysis of those records looked like there were numerous prescriptions that were filled and identified up to April 8th of 2013 with no further activity following that. I conducted additional, more thorough analysis of those records, looking at patterns and frequencies of those medications being filled, but they all stop following April 2013.
And that would predate the date that Victoria went missing?
That is correct.
And the following slide, dated September 7th, 2017, what does that note?
I learned that the James Prokopovitz had been evicted from his property at 5118 Coonish Road, and therefore I took the opportunity to examine the property yet again at that time.
Was there anything significant noted about the items that were left in the residence?
Yes, I noted that there were the number of decorations and knickknacks and things that Mr. Prokopovitch indicated belonged to his wife had been left behind. But more significantly, I noted what appeared to be family pictures that still remained there.
Family pictures of Jim and Vicky?
Correct.
And those were left behind?
Correct.
Now, the next slide, May 1st, 2018, what does that reflect?
Information came in that there are some retention ponds that are located in the village of Pulaski, and that we maybe should check those locations with no further information aside from that, just really basically that they're there. And so we did so.
When you're getting different types of tips in investigations, does it assist you if there are details about specific areas that need to be looked at?
It does. When we receive tips or informations, we're looking for really any actionable information. So, for example, we received a number of tips from psychics that said that we should look by a tree, or and that's really not very actionable in nature. But when we receive something that's, the more detail we get, the better it is when it comes to our search efforts. And also we're looking at the source of information, if this is hearsay or rumors, as opposed to something that's obtained from somebody firsthand.
And even if it was some of that more tenuous information, were you attempting to follow up with each and every tip that you were receiving in this case?
Each and every tip.
And that's why a search of this retention pond, when it's just more vague, is something you still did look at?
Yes.
And did you locate Victoria there?
No.
The following slide says that April 4th, 2019. What is that?
Once again, we're continuing to conduct ongoing records checks in reference to Victoria Prokopovitch.
The information that you got with respect to this, did you utilize resources through DCI and Special Agent Jurgis with some of these things as well?
Correct. Some of them were conducted by me, and a lot of them were conducted by Special Agent Jurgis.
But with regard to this, again, with DOT, the Department of Transportation, that's driver license status?
Correct.
As of that, were there any entries? There's no DOT entries in any of the other 49 states. What does that mean?
So that means that there's not a record of, through the Department of Transportation in 49 states relating to Victoria Prokopovitz.
So no sign of Victoria in any of those states based on that?
That's correct.
Now, there's also no vehicle registration records after 2001, is that right?
That's correct.
So nothing noted as being registered to her either?
Correct.
Now, the next page, May 7, 2019, what investigative efforts does that reflect?
Checks with the State Taxes, Department of Revenue.
And with respect to that, again, were you utilizing the efforts of DCI and Special Agent Jurgis?
I was.
With respect to that, was there anything located of note?
Can you say that question one more time, please?
Yeah. Was there anything located with respect to the presence of Victoria Prokopovitz?
There was not, no.
And the following slide, May 10th, 2019, what does that reflect?
It reflects additional efforts to help document and search for any particular possible evidence of Victoria Prokopovitch in this particular case in the area of 5118 Kunish Road, utilizing additional equipment and resources. On this particular date, there was a manned plane that in part documented 224 images, as well as 3 different unmanned area vehicles that recorded numerous videos and images documenting the area.
Now, we had some of the drone search individuals testify here in this case, and in the years of law enforcement that you've been engaged in, isn't it true that there have been advances in technology that are now utilized to assist law enforcement?
There is.
Now, this drone search, that's something that has become more prevalent in the past, say, 5 to 10 years. Is that right?
It has.
And with regard to the efforts, are you attempting to utilize all different forms of searching techniques?
Yes.
And some of them offer different things?
Yes.
A drone, does the drone sometimes have the ability to get into places that you wouldn't be able to visually see from, let's say, an airplane?
Yeah, a unmanned area vehicle generally operates at a lower altitude, being able to provide a different vantage point with different types of images than as opposed to an airplane. But each one of them have their strengths and differences, and going back to what I said before, we're looking for overlapping. So some of the things may be similar utilizing those 2 different technologies, but some may be different, so we're going to deploy them both.
Some may just be giving a different vantage point.
Correct.
Now, proceeding to the next slide, May 20th, 2019, what is that?
It's an additional search effort at the quarry that we had discussed before on Quarry Drive. Once again, when I learn that there is additional technology or resources or equipment that's available, I make sure that we utilize that as the years go on in order to conduct continued searches in the hopes to be able to identify any potential evidence as to the location of Victoria Prokopovitch.
And did you locate anything in reference to her on that date?
I did not.
Now, the following slide that says interviews, what does that memorialize?
I was being very conservative at this point in time. I indicate that there's been over 100 individuals that's been interviewed by the police. The number is, I'm sure, much higher than that.
Besides the 100 individuals interviewed by police, does it also indicate that there are numerous that have been interviewed multiple times?
Correct.
Besides that, what does the slide reflect with regard to ongoing contact?
So ongoing contact with family and friends is very, very important in case there's any information that there's been word from Victoria Prokopovitch or any information about Victoria Prokopovitch, that the police are immediately notified and that they stay in the loop of that communication ring.
With regard to the contact that you've had with various family and friends, has the information and contact that you have had with Marcia Loritz been constant and fluid?
Constant, ongoing, and fluid. That's correct.
And the contact that you've had with Stacey Deer, it's been like that as well?
It has.
And as well as Wes Edges?
Correct.
Has your contact with Jim Prokopovitz changed since the time that his wife went missing?
It has changed. There's been ongoing contact with him, but it's definitely changed.
Okay. Now, at the time that you're doing all these informations, do you find any credible information that Victoria has been seen?
I do not.
Have you received any credible information that anyone has heard from her?
I have not.
Or do you receive any credible information that they have been contacted by her?
I have not.
In the reviews and the interviews that you conduct with people, there was also forensic analysis done of her phone?
Yes, as technology improved over the years, as I had indicated before, in 2013, I identified 41 contacts and went through all 41 contacts. But as technology and resources improved over the years, I continued to do forensic extraction and examination of phone records.
Now, an average person, with respect to what you're outlining here for the jury today, but all the various databases and ways that law enforcement can track someone down, that isn't always information that is available to the public. Is that right?
Correct.
So hypothetically speaking, if somebody ever didn't want to be located or would be missing voluntarily, they wouldn't be aware of all these different ways that law enforcement could track them. Would you agree?
I would agree, and it obviously depends on the sophistication of the person. So the victimology in this case goes a long way to be able to understand who it is that is missing.
Why is that?
Well, because in part, Victoria Prokopovitch didn't even know how to turn on a computer. She had a flip phone and had a hard time using it and had next to no use. I think that in itself speaks a lot about her ability and her understanding of technology and being able to avoid all these databases in order to avoid detection of her movement or signs of life.
And based upon your training and experience and the facts of this case, does it also have to do with the reasonableness of whether she could have accomplished that?
It does, and it's completely unreasonable that she would be able to.
Now, the next slide indicates volunteer groups. Is this a lot of the groups that have assisted through the years with the search?
It has. It's a listing of the ones that I was able to identify.
And that would, if you could just outline for the jury, they've heard from most of these. Which groups are they? So
from top to bottom, Wisconsin Missing Persons Advocacy Incorporated People and Paws Search and Rescue Incorporated, Wisconsin Canine SOS Search and Rescue, Fred Karski, Human Remains Detection Canine Service, Valley Mounted Volunteers Search and Rescue Incorporated, Nicolay Search Team, Wisconsin Rapids Search and Rescue, Headwaters Search and Rescue, and CURT.
And these are all organizations that assisted law enforcement?
In this specific investigation, that's correct.
Now, with respect to the missing persons awareness billboard, was that also something that was utilized in this case as a means for getting the word out about Victoria?
It was my understanding that Lamar, company that runs the billboards, had donated billboard space to be able to get the word out, not only about Victoria Prokopovitch, but other cases.
So are those like the billboards we're seeing along the side of the highway when we're driving by?
Yes, they are. So there's I had identified locations on heavily traveled areas like highway thoroughfares and had documented locations of these billboards and identified really the traffic that is estimated to have viewed those billboards.
And how many of these digital billboards were placed around Northeast Wisconsin?
So this billboard program, I believe it started around 2016 and continued through 17, 18, and 19. And so it varied from year to year, but it was a couple of dozen to begin with.
And the visual impressions then that would have been displayed weekly, do you know approximately how many times?
It was hundreds of thousands.
Okay. And at some point you had noted it was more than 800,000?
That's what I noted in the slides based on the records that I reviewed.
Okay. And you talked about 12 digital billboards, but at some point there was an excess of 25 billboards throughout Wisconsin?
I indicated a couple of dozen, so 25.
Okay. And the estimated viewership with respect to that was noted, or you received information, would be approximately 20 million?
That's correct.
Now, besides all of these things that were done, there was also print media, newspapers that had information regarding the fact that Victoria was missing, is that right?
That's correct.
And these missing person awareness events, those are things that occurred since 2014 up until today's date with regard to trying to get the word out about Victoria?
I think due to COVID, there had been some restrictions recently, but that is correct.
And who is organizing those events?
Marcia Lawrence.
Now, besides the reference that we've made also to the state of Wisconsin imposing a missing persons day at the request and decree, the request of Marcia Lawrence, but the decree of the governor, there were also monetary rewards that were placed out for information relating to the location or whereabouts of Victoria Prokopovitz. Is that correct as well?
That's correct.
The distribution was happening annually since 2013 in the Pulaski area. Is that true?
The reward was offered annually for a period of time after 2013. I don't know if that ever stopped. It was funded by the family, and it was so it went on for a number of years after 2013.
Besides the Pulaski area, that was extended to the Crivets and Green Bay area?
It was.
And with regard to distribution, were there also fairs like the Seymour Fair and Kewaunee County Fair where information was also offered to individuals about the attempts to find Vicki?
That's correct. The family would reach out to me, keep me apprised as to these community outreach, and would proceed with them, and I would document them.
Did Jim Prokopovitz, when you mentioned family, ever reach out to you about any of these events?
No, I can't recall Jim Prokopovitch ever reaching out to me in reference to this matter,
And these events?
these events.
Do we have road journey? Sergeant Aronstein, I still have some stuff to go through with you, but in the essence of kind of shifting things with time right now, were you present? You were present in court when we called a witness by the name of Sarah Youngs.
I was.
At the time that she testified, Ms. Youngs indicated that she recalled a telephone conversation with you where she gave you information about her friend Vicky. Do you remember that?
I do.
And that is a recording that you have in reference to memorializing what that phone conversation was about?
That's correct.
Your Honor, Ms. Youngs testified. I'm going to object to having this audio played at this time. They had an opportunity to have Ms. Youngs verify it. Detective Aronstein was recording it, but they had opportunity to have her testify, and now we're going to have it play without the opportunity of any recross-examination. I would object to having this played at this time.
The testimony was, Your Honor, she didn't recall it, so the proper way to be admitting it would be through the witness that then reported it. That's why we're doing it this way.
But it was for refreshing her memory.
All those thoughts, jurors will give you your 1-hour lunch break at this time. We're outside the presence of the jurors. So, you're going to play a video of what? Exactly.
All it is that telephone conversation, so that's why when she was on the stand, I wasn't doing it for refreshing recollection, as he's indicating this would be impeachment for purposes of the fact that at the time that she testified, she didn't know what she had said. So it wasn't really necessarily refreshing recollection. That's why I made sure I laid the foundation through her. I said, do you remember that telephone call? It was with Sergeant Aronstein. And on that date, closer in time, you said what you said. And she said no. So that's why we're doing it this way. And that's proper under the law.
Okay, so again, I'm asking you, what is this video of?
It's not a video.
This is a recording of the phone conversation?
Exactly.
All right, so it's an audio recording of the phone conversation with your witness right now, and where he was talking to a woman who was a prior witness in the case.
Yes. And I think, Your Honor, it's brief. It's 8 minutes and 37 seconds.
All right. Mr. D'Angelo, then?
Well, Your Honor, if she's going to use it for impeachment purposes, again, this is testimony. If she's going to impeach the witness has to be here to have the ability to re-examine based on that impeachment. She's trying to get evidence in without the ability to recall this witness that she's released and we released. It's improper to have impeachment testimony when the witness who they're impeaching isn't here.
Your Honor, we do this every time when we call like a witness to the stand, and if they say something different, then we're putting in, so that's kind of what we're doing.
All right, so what do you claim the witness said that you're going to impeach?
So at
Again,
the
what's her
time-
testimony that she testified to, and now what do you claim is
So
going to be on
at
the
the
tape?
time she testified, she indicated that she had heard that Victoria believed that her husband was having an affair and that she was upset by that. This gives specificity. Quite frankly, it could be admitted as a prior consistent statement too, because the defense did cross-examine that. But we were going, when I asked her if she remembered the specifics of the phone conversation, she said she did not. So it's really coming in like 3 different ways.
Mr. Angelo?
Your Honor, the witness isn't here again to cross or clarify her statement that she made. There's inability to take a statement that's on a recording and have her recrossed, nor is Detective Aronstein going to be able to know what was in that person's mind when she made the statement because it wasn't clarified. It's a conversation. If they wanted to impeach Ms. Youngs, they should have impeached her yesterday with the conversation. They didn't do that, so I, again, object to the idea that they're going to play a recording that has no ability to be re-cross-examined.
We're not following, Your Honor, with respect to how's that different with a statement. We do that every time. We bring in the person then who took the statement. So I don't know what their concern is with respect to that. They had an adequate opportunity to cross-examine her with respect to it. So I don't know why the jury not hearing the actual call when we had her already testify. I don't remember all of that with respect to that. So I don't know why we wouldn't be able to play that.
So her testimony was that she didn't recall the phone conversation?
The entire phone conversation, yes. But she did testify to the subject that would be coming in on this already.
I'll overrule the objection and allow it.
Thank you.
All right, so we have to be back then a bit less than an hour for lunch, lunch recess. Court's in recess.